Okay, let's talk property tax.
Let's start with some context. Minutes after being sworn in as Finance Minister on May 3rd, Devindranath Thakur was asked what's to become of those who already paid property taxes if in fact the incoming government plans to repeal the law.
I think it's logical that those persons will have to be refunded.
Fast forward under 2 weeks later and the Prime Minister is saying something else.
And refunds, Dr. Thakur. I think the only person mentioned refunds, I have never said that. Let Thakur tell me where he's finding the money for refunds. He's the Minister of Finance.
Asked for clarification this morning on the rationale for this apparent turnaround, Thakur would only say, I think the Prime Minister's words are unambiguous. But still, for clarity's sake, we sent questions to Minister Thakur via his communication department, where we again asked for the rationale for what seems to be a turnaround on refunds, how much money in property tax has been collected so far, and what happens to the money already paid by citizens. But the only response we got on behalf of Minister Thakur said, the Prime Minister has spoken and her words are clear. However, further information on the process will be disclosed in due course. All attempts to speak with Minister Thakur directly were unsuccessful. Now, commenting on these developments, former Prime Minister Stuart Young said he's observing this carefully as a citizen who also already paid his property tax. And this would be a good test case for a claim in the court for legitimate expectation of a refund. Economist Dr. Marlene Atz, meanwhile, does not believe the Finance Minister misspoke on the issue, but she said maybe his comment was premature. But from a financial and logistical standpoint, Dr. Atz believes the administrative cost and complexity of processing refunds at this scale may not be fiscally or operationally sensible. She said it goes beyond whether the state can afford it, but it must be considered if such a process is the best use of the ministry's staff and finances. Another economist, Dr. Ronald Ramkissoon, said while it is not unusual to get mixed messages from a new administration, he hopes sooner rather than later all ministers sing from the same hymn sheet. And for the public's sake, there is clearer and proper messaging going forward. And political scientist Dr. Bishnu Raghunath says people would feel slighted by this apparent turnaround. He said maybe down the line there may be a mechanism for refunds in some way, but he too wants the government to not have mixed messaging going forward.
This is one of the things that the experienced members of the government and the cabinet will have to kind of rein in and ensure that members of cabinet as well as members of parliament act in the manner in which in a uniformed manner.
However, Dr. Raghunath said to the UNC administration's credit, it is so far keeping its intention of repealing property tax.
It's a hot topic. It's been trending on the news in Trinidad and Tobago for a while now. With the outgoing government and the incoming government, it's been a hot topic. So let's try and clear it up. Let's talk about it. Hopefully after this, you'd have a better understanding of where we currently stand with the threat of property tax being implemented on you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So the Prime Minister and the new UNC government say they are against property tax in its present form. Now, note those words carefully. Against property tax in its present form. Those are the key words here. In its present form. So the question is, are we witnessing a rebrand or a repackaging of property tax in prettier language? I'm going to break this down to you as best as I can of what I believe is likely to happen or what I believe is ahead for you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, you ask yourself, is this truth or trickery? What's going on here? So the Prime Minister recently contradicted her finance minister by implying payments already made might not be refunded. Payments already made may not be refunded. But What really raised eyebrows, I suppose, was her statement. We have always been against the property tax in this present form. So that's not a complete eradication of property tax, as you are so led to believe. It's referring to it in its current form. That's political speak for we're not scrapping it. We're just changing how it looks. We're going to dress it up. We're going to make it look pretty. And then we're going to repackage it and we're going to sell it back to you. And hopefully you'd buy it. And make no mistake, the principle of property tax is not the issue here. The real issue is who carries the burden. Who carries the burden of another tax? And this is why I talk about this capitalist world society we live in needs to be eradicated. Trinidad is nearly 60% debt to GDP. And the government is scrambling for revenue. But instead of targeting the elites and the multimillionaires, the billionaires, and the corporations in Trinidad and Tobago profiting from the richness of the land and natural resources, guess who they are targeting? Of course, it's you, the working man, the working class, whichever you want to call yourself. They are targeting you. They're not targeting the billionaires. They're targeting you. Ordinary homeowners, the middle class, the poor. You see this being repeated time and time again, and it's just frustrating now. Today, I want to be clear. Property tax is a revenue-raising tool. It's used by government around the world. In theory, it funds local infrastructure. It funds schools. It funds roads, waste collection, hospital, etc., etc. But in reality, in a capitalist system like ours, it's another way of taxing the poor while letting the rich off the hook. Why? Because true wealth in Trinidad isn't in the house you live in. It is not in the house you live in. It's in undeclared land holdings, offshore accounts, and big corporations. That's where the true wealth of Trinidad and Tobago is. This is why I talk about Trinidad and Tobago being robbed by the likes of Shell, by the likes of BP. You have these big companies that come into the island, and they don't come there for goodwill. They come there because we have resources that they want, that they need. And they take most of it and give us a few jobs back here and there. So in the UK, property taxes takes the form of what we call council tax. And that's based on your property's value. And your property's in a band, a value band, for example. But even then, the wealthiest landowners, like the multi-billionaire corporate landlords, they often receive huge exemptions on, or they find legal ways around paying property tax. So the rich will always find a way around doing this, by the way. That's what they do. And that's left with the poorest in community, the poorest boroughs, the poorest communities. They pay the highest percentage of their income on what we call council tax in the UK. Whilst the rich absorb it like it's a simple parking ticket. It's a very familiar system in Trinidad and Tobago. So when we compare it to Trinidad, where many homeowners are still struggling to fix a leaky roof or to put a decent roof on their house, or to get clean drinking water or pipe water. Taxing properties here in Trinidad feels more like a punishment for existing than a contribution to community development. That's what it would feel like to the people of Trinidad. So you may ask yourself, is this just a UNC versus PNM politics? And here's the trap. Politicians like to position this as a PNM tax or a UNC tax or whatever it may be, or it ends up being. But let's not fall for the tribal game here. Because what we're witnessing is a continuity disguised as change. A continuity disguised as change. The UNC may remove the current structure that was supposed to be put in by the PNM, but it's highly unlikely they will replace it with something that's, well, it's highly likely that they will replace it with something that sounds better, essentially, whilst still squeezing the same citizens for the same money. So the Prime Minister's vagueness in this, when she says in its current form or its present form, leaves the door wide open. It leaves the door wide open for a new version, a more prettier version, a more dressed up version. She just wants it to feel less painful to you politically. But if it still taxes struggling homeowners while the elites and the billionaires pay nothing, then it's just a polished turd, for want of a better phrase. It's crap. It's nonsense. It's pathetic. It's useless. It's a I don't know. It's a rubbish car dressed up in Ferrari package. So let's ask the real question: why aren't the ultra wealthy in Trinidad taxed properly? Where are the taxes on foreign investors who own blocks of commercial properties in Trinidad and Tobago? The conglomerates dominating our supermarkets and hardware stores. Where are the tax on them? Where are the tax on the people with mega mansions, with private security and imported tiles? Why is the burden always placed on the everyday Trinidadian, just trying to make their house stand upright? Because in this system, the poor are taxed, the middle class are trapped, and the rich are untouchable. This is the capitalist system that we live in, and this is why we are failing repeatedly. So this tax is likely to go through, dressed up as something more presentable to you. And I say this to you, Trinidad doesn't have a property tax problem. It has a fairness problem, a class problem. So don't be distracted by the PNM versus UNC theatre. What you have to demand is transparency. You have to demand equity. Demand that those who have the most give the most. That's not a difficult thing to ask. They've got more than they need anyway. I don't think we're against taxation. What people are against is exploitation. And believe me, the poor are constantly, repeatedly, annoyingly being exploited. And at some point, we must stand up and say, enough is enough. I hope this time comes sooner rather than later. Anyway, that's my take. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys on my next video. For now, much love. God bless. Take care. Peace.